This is, of course, absurd. It's ridiculous. But when those are the voices that are being heard, it has a tendency to push the debate and the dialogue in a particular direction. And where is the pushback? As I said, this is the culture. The amount of money that is going into this industry is beyond belief. It is staggering. And that means that that's where the eyes are, that's where the ears are. And so if the goal then is to address people through culture, this is the place to do it. And that's what Len and I were doing. And that's what I really want to urge everybody to at least think about. Because when your message is comic books, that's stupid. Superheroes, that's ridiculous. Science fiction, who can believe that stuff? Well, you've just dissed everything that they like watching, reading, listening to. How much are they going to listen to you on the stuff that matters? Whereas if you point to a superhero character, say Batman, and point out, here's a guy who is taking upon himself to eliminate justice. He's got all this money. Is he giving it to the government? No. He's funding his own crusade to bring justice into the world one at a time. And, you know, that reminds me of something that I read in Frederick Bastiat, or whatever. Whatever. However you want to get there, it's a terrific avenue. So with that said, I want to finish this out by telling you a little bit about what our point was. Now, last year we presented, as I said, Gods Among Men. It was talking about superheroes and the way that various superhero characters embody this philosophy of individualism. Well, this year we decided to come at it from the other side and talk about the villains and subtly point out the ways that some of the villains push in the opposite direction. Now, there were three of us there. There was me, there was Len, and there was our friend Kaylee Higginson. Some of you might know. He actually lives up in Minnesota right now, but he came down to Denver Comic-Con just to join us because he is a huge comics fan, and he was able to fill in a lot of our information. We started off with a very simple question. What makes a villain? Paralleling what we did last year. What is it about the Joker, Lex Luthor, any of these characters that makes them bad? This is a great angle because it basically points to the questions, the fundamental questions of morality, of philosophy. And we decided to break this down into 5 archetypes, 5 kind of groupings of these superhero villain characters. You've got thieves, you've got tyrants, you've got those who act as if the end justifies the means. You've got forces of nature, and that's kind of an interesting one. And then finally, because he's really a category all to himself, you got the Joker. There's really no other villains that you can put in that same bucket. He is unique, and I'm going to come back to that. So there's a whole huge category of comic book villains who are basically thieves. And it basically comes down to exactly what it sounds like. You see something, you want it, you don't pay attention to issues of rights. And there are a few different characters that we chose as emblems of thieves. The most basic one is the perpetual Batman, not exactly nemesis. They kind of go back and forth. There's a romantic thing between Batman and Catwoman. She's a bad guy, but sometimes she's good, sometimes she's helpful. It's interesting to note with Catwoman that even when she's doing something good, it's not typically for reasons of sound morality or good philosophy, but rather she's in love with Batman and she wants to help him. So it's about people, not specific individuals, not about an overarching morality. And that's kind of instructive. But beyond that, there's not a lot to say. I mean, she's just your basic garden variety thief. She's just very, very good at it. Now, you contrast that with a character like Reverse Flash. Now, Flash, for those of you who don't know comic books as a character, he runs really fast. And he can do a lot of things really fast. Not a word, Mike. Reverse Flash is variously a number of different people. One of the best known, he was just depicted in the Flash television series, which just completed its first season. A lot of fun, by the way. That show is very entertaining to watch. He's this one character named Eobard Thawne, who has a vicious grudge against the Flash. He came back to our time from the future, and basically he just wants to ruin Flash's life, and then when he's taken everything else from the Flash, kill him. But only then. First, it's to strip him down to nothing, take away all of his friends, take away all of his loved ones, all of the admiration that he receives from the public at large for all of his good deeds. That's what Reverse Flash wants to do. He's the anti-Flash. And in that way, he is also kind of, sort of, a thief. Makes him a fun character. And most interestingly to me, there's this guy. Now, if anybody has been watching the Avengers movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, you might recognize him. This is a character named Thanos. And he's a bad guy that's been hinted at throughout several of the movies. Now, Thanos is this alien creature who has immense powers, and he has one overriding goal. He has one thing that he wants to do, and that is he wants to wipe out all life in the universe. Well, that doesn't sound like a thief per se, does it? Well, it does when you realize what his motivation. Why? Why does he want to wipe out all life in the universe? Well, there's this girl. I'm not actually kidding. In the Marvel Comics universe, Death is personified as a woman. There is the figure of Lady Death. Thanos is in love with Lady Death. And he basically wants to steal life from everybody else in the universe in order to woo the chick that he has a crush on. It's kind of silly when you boil it down that way, but it's also funny as hell. So those are thieves. Next category that Len and I talked about are tyrants. And in some ways, this is the one that speaks to a lot of liberty people the most, because what are we fighting against after all? This and no other is the root from which a tyrant springs. When he first appears, he is a protector. Tyrants generally try to come at you from the, hey, I'm just here to help sort of angle. And we got a few examples of those. Okay. Ra's al Ghul is a character who's shown up in a number of dramatic presentations. He was in Batman Begins, played by Liam Neeson. He was in the last season of The Arrow on the CW, about the Green Arrow. He's shown up a couple of other places. He is a guy who has lived for hundreds of years because he has a way of regenerating himself, resurrecting himself, and he's always about enforcing his will on other people. Take the Batman Begins movie, where he looked at Gotham City, Batman's home, decided it had become so corrupt it just needed to be destroyed. Now, this is ostensibly about helping people. And this is about helping them by making the world look like what Ra's wanted it to look like. That's almost textbook tyranny, and very cold-blooded tyranny, as it happens. Then you've got this guy, Darkseid. Darkseid is a character from DC Comics. He's been the nemesis of a number of characters. He is an alien, and he rules over a planet named Apokolips. No symbolism there. And his entire goal is to obtain this thing called the anti-life equation. And what is the anti-life equation? Well, very simply, the anti-life equation is a mathematical equation that will give the possessor the power to control the will and emotions of every single being in the universe. Imagine what you could do with that kind of power. And that makes him, to my mind, perhaps the most evil character in this whole pantheon, with perhaps the exception of the Joker, who I'm coming to at the end. And the third tyrant, yes, this guy is called Brainiac. He comes out of Superman. Now, Brainiac is actually not a person. Brainiac is a computer, an artificial intelligence, who is tasked with the mission of going throughout the universe and cataloging everything, all knowledge. But Brainiac ran into a problem. He found out that as soon as you catalog a planet that has living creatures on it, as soon as you got that done, instantly your information is out of date, because living creatures change. They evolve, they grow in, they do new things, especially intelligent creatures. So what is the solution to this problem? Because he's never going to be able to achieve his programming. He's never going to be able to fulfill that. How do you solve a problem like this? Well, simple. Once you've visited a planet and you've cataloged everything and everyone on that planet, you destroy it. You kill everyone. And now you've got a perfectly frozen little nugget of knowledge. Isn't that sweet? That's Brainiac, and that's the last of the tyrant figures. And let me pause. I realize I'm going through this rather quickly. What Len and I did was, about this pace, The idea being, we didn't want to present a whole lecture to people at Comic-Con. Rather, we wanted to throw some things out there that would spark some ideas, and then pose some questions at the end, which is what I'm going to do. The ends justify the means. Now, the quote that's presented here, I've been at the mercy of men just following orders. Never again. Notice that phrase, never again. That has certain historical resonance. That's because this line was written for a particular villain character who's going to come at the end of this section. Now, the first example we've got is a character named Amanda Waller. She has shown up, again, in a lot of these movies and television shows, particularly the television shows. She is a mother from the Cabrini Green Project in Chicago, so she's a welfare mom, who went to college, got her degree in political science, and found her way to be in charge of a government agency called The Agency. And the agency basically runs captive superheroes and villains. There's a movie coming out next year called Suicide Squad. It's an assemblage of villains and characters who kind of ride the line, who are organized by this woman, Amanda Waller, to go out and perform missions on behalf of the U.S. government. Sometimes those missions are savory, sometimes they are And she is very much of an ends justify. She was, I think, number 8 in some particular poll's list of most popular villains. She is absolutely seen as a villain because she has no scruples. She has only her own goals that follow no moral lines whatsoever. If people get killed, if children die from a horrible virus, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. That's ends justify. Also, Sinestro. Sinestro comes to us from the Green Lantern comics. The Green Lantern Corps, interesting fact for people who know science fiction and know comics, they were based on a series of books by E.E. Doc Smith, science fiction books called the Lensman series. Kind of the first space opera. Star Wars is in the vein of space opera, to give you an idea. Sinestro was at one point the leader of the Green Lantern Corps, until it was found out how he had used the power that the Green Lanterns gave him. And basically, all Green Lanterns wear a green ring that allows them to manifest whatever their imagination can conjure. All they need is sufficient will. Green is the color of will. And they found out that he had used this power to pacify his own home planet by basically imposing tyranny. So they stripped him of his green ring and kicked him out of the Corps. Not one to be deterred, Sinestro then sought out the Yellow Lantern Corps, yellow being the color of fear, deciding, well, if I can't do this with will, I'm going to do it with fear. Because he knows what's best. The ends justify whatever means he has to implement to see those ends carried out. Magneto. This is the guy I was talking about who gave that quote at the beginning. Never again. Magneto, for those of you who have seen X-Men, you know this. He was a Polish Jew who was brought to the concentration camps, saw his parents killed there, found his power, master of magnetism there, and decided that he was never going to let happen to his people, mutants, what had happened to his other people, Jews. And so he decided to wage a war against normal human beings. Because, of course, in the goal of saving his brother mutants, no particular measure was too extreme. And he's one of those characters who kind of rides the line back and forth between good and evil, but it always comes down to, if I got to do it, and if it is in service to this goal of saving mutants, well, then I'm going to do it. Ends justify the means. Finally, this is a character that I talked about last year during Gods Among Men. This is a character named Ozymandias. He comes out of a comic called The Watchmen. It was made into a movie a few years ago. Really briefly, this is a character who was a former member of a superhero team. He's a hero. He fought for good. He fought for law and order. He fought for justice. Who murdered one of his former teammates, framed another one of his teammates for that murder, sent several others on kind of a wild goose chase while he pursued his real goal, which was to kill millions of people in cities throughout the world. Why? Because he saw a nuclear holocaust coming. The movie is set during the 80s at the height of nuclear terror. He saw a nuclear holocaust coming that would kill everybody and said, it's worth it to kill millions of people to save billions. Now, that's a really interesting philosophic problem. As problems of morality go, that's a humdinger. Forces of nature. Now, there's a set of characters that we come across in comic books that are not really bad guys per se. They get cast in that role, but it's hard to look at them. They are simply amoral because they're not persons the way that we think of them. And I have two examples. That's an interesting example, but no, we did not include Captain Planet. I did include Galactus. He is typically found in the Fantastic Four, although he comes up in others. The Fantastic Four movie that came out a few years ago, Fantastic Four 2, Rise of the Silver Surfer, kind of sort of dealt with Galactus, but not really. But Galactus is this being who exists from essentially the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. And all he does is he goes throughout the universe seeking planets. They have to be inhabited planets to destroy. Why? So that he can feed on their life force and continue his existence. That's it. He destroys life all the time, intelligent life, in order to feed and keep going. Now, is that evil? Well, anybody here have a burger tonight? We destroy life all the time. What's the difference? And you could say, well, rational beings, but what is a rational being on our level to a being who is basically the difference between us and an amoeba is about this much to a guy like Galactus. It's hard to stand in judgment. And there's an interesting story about Galactus in one set of comics in the Fantastic Four. Galactus was weakened. Something happened to take away all his energy. And Reed Richards, the leader of the Fantastic Four, built a machine that fed a whole bunch of energy into Galactus, reviving him so he could then go on his merry way. Well, aliens of the galaxy didn't like this. We were about to be rid of Galactus. No more planets are going to die. And you saved him. What are you thinking? So they captured Reed Richards and put him on trial, being tried by the remnants of all of these alien species that were pretty much wiped out by Galactus. And Reed Richards mounted a very eloquent defense, talking about, he quoted Einstein, I believe that God does not play dice with the universe. And at the very end, kind of a deus ex machina, the consciousness of the universe descends and kind of lets everybody know that no, Galactus actually does have his place in the way of things, and Reed Richards did the right thing, and everything ends happily. Except Galactus is still out there destroying planets. Along with this, we have a character named Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix showed up a little bit in some of the X-Men movies. You remember Jean Grey, the redhead telekinetic. Well, in the comics, she got this enormous power. She sacrificed her life, saving her teammates. And in the course of so doing, a cosmic power called the Phoenix Force entered her body and restored her to life and gave her unbelievable, enormous power. Well, through a variety of circumstances, this power eventually became too great for her. It corrupted her. It turned her dark. It turned her evil. And what did she do? She flew off and consumed a star. That star happened to have a planet orbiting it that had a population of several billion intelligent beings. So she wiped out a race, kind of like Galactus. She was beaten, confined. Jean Grey realized what she had done, felt enormous grief. There was another trial by combat, as it were. And things are looking dark, and then she started to feel the change come upon her. And she became Phoenix again, and then became Dark Phoenix again, realized this cycle was never going to end, because the Phoenix represents the force of life, the fire that burns us, the fire that animates us, and the fire at the end that burns us to cinders and then allows us to rise up from those ashes. It's all very symbolic, but she realized basically there was going to be no end to this, so she killed herself to save the universe, going out a hero. But she also occupies a problematic place in all this. That's the movie. In the now, in the comic book, she
just outed yourself, bud.
That's hilarious.
And even there, you can look at it and say, well, she could have stopped him. She didn't. She specifically told him to kill her and let it happen. This is a kind of suicide. So, all right. Final category, the Joker. The Joker is unlike any other character. In fact, going back to the title, Gods and Demons. We've seen a number of characters who can be seen perhaps as gods. I'd say Galactus qualifies, Phoenix, Darkseid is a very dark god. Joker is the real true demon in here. Consider that Heath Ledger, who played the Joker in the movie, spent an extended period of time in this guy's head and ended up ODing on pills. I tend not to look at that as coincidence. I really don't. Because it's an incredibly dark character. This is a guy who obeys no morality at all, not even his own. He's purely about chaos, about torment. There's a video game based on the DC Comics universe in which the world is basically sent to hell when the Joker coaxes Superman into accidentally killing his wife, Lois Lane, and his unborn son. The Joker took down Superman. After that, Superman just went nuts and went off, and things all went to hell from there. The Joker tormented Superman into leaving his planet. If you know the character, that's a big deal. The Joker is not just insane. There's no way really for us to understand the mentality of a character like this. He just exists to bring pain. He doesn't want to kill Batman. That would ruin the fun. He's got years and years of tormenting and torturing this guy. He'll kill Robin. In one of the comic books, the Joker killed Robin. And he's killed numerous other people that Bruce Wayne has known and loved, just purely to bring pain into the guy's life. And in The Dark Knight Returns, a comic that came out in the 1980s, it's about Batman as an older middle-aged guy. He's in his late 50s, and he decides to come out of retirement for one last romp. The Joker corners Batman into a particular situation and kills himself specifically to frame Batman and ruin Batman's reputation. Make it look like Batman at last killed. That was the line that Batman would never cross. But Joker made it look like Batman did it when in fact he did it himself, and it's really gruesome. Batman has fought Joker to a standstill, and he's broken Joker's back. Joker can't move. And so it is with sheer force of will that he turns his head to the side until it finally goes snap. How's that for gruesome? So those are the villains that we trotted out as sort of our examples of villainy. And it covers a lot of bases. It covers a lot of different territory, and it takes us back to the question that we started out with at the beginning. What makes a villain? What do all these guys have in common? What are some of the things that drive them in the same direction? And before I launch into the answers that we offered up, I'd like to get some thoughts. What do all these guys have in common? Need to control. Interesting. Can you expand on that?
Well, whatever world they see out there doesn't fit what they want, and they want to make it what they want it.
Okay, they want to make the world what they want it, but isn't that what Superman does? Is there anybody here who would say that Superman is not a hero? Okay, so Superman wants to make the world the way that he sees it to be. What divides Superman from a Joker or a Darkseid or a Galactus?
Superman waits for a crisis.
He waits for a crisis, okay. Meaning, come on, with as many anarcho-libertarians as we have in this room, I can't believe nobody's brought out this particular phrase.
Initiation of force.
Thank you. Initiation of force. Yes. That's, it kind of is too easy, and that's part of why I wasn't going to draw this one out, because everybody here knows where we're coming from here. But yes, it boils down to initiation of force. It boils down to this idea that the villain thinks, this is how I want the world to be, and it doesn't matter, Susan, how you think your life should be. It doesn't matter. I know how the world ought to be, and I'm going to shape it for you.
Thank you, Chief Smith.
So these are the answers that we came up with. Yeah, what makes a villain? Uses force against others. Now, we started there intentionally because that's a nice ambiguous one. Doesn't Batman use force against others? Oh, yeah. Doesn't the Green Lantern use force? Doesn't Superman use force? Oh, yes. But it is that distinction, and we tried to coax people in the Q&A kind of in this direction, that it is the distinction between initiating force and responding with force when rights are being threatened. And we got pretty far with it. That was kind of interesting. Second item, take what is not theirs. This goes back to our thieves. And we could be talking about property. We could be talking about life, which is property. We could be talking about decisions that you make for your life. Those are not, Susan's decisions for her life. Those are not mine to make. But if I'm a bad guy, I don't care. I'm going to take that upon myself anyway. And then finally, and this I think is one of the key points, they do not see others as of equal worth. That I am smarter. I am stronger. I am more moral. I have a better perspective on what life requires. Therefore, whatever I decide to do, covered. I'm good. I don't have to ask permission about shaping the world. I don't have to ask permission of a few million people. I'm saving billions of people. They're going to die anyway, so I might as well make them die to save the rest. That's a villainous kind of decision. Now, one of the things, and this I'm going to kind of close out here. One of the interesting things to me about presenting this panel at Comic-Con, towards the end, there was a guy who asked a question, and he said, doesn't this really just come down to perspective? You know, we look at the Joker and we see somebody who's evil. Joker doesn't think he's evil. He thinks he's an agent of chaos, but chaos is the nature of the universe. We look at somebody like Darkseid. He wants to take everybody's willpower away. He doesn't see that as a bad thing. People are screwing up. He's going to make everything right. And it was remarkable that here comes somebody giving this perfect encapsulation of absolutely relative morality with no objectivity to it whatsoever. But what was striking to me was not that he said it. You remember everything I said to you about the panels that are there. The leftward bent, the progressive bent in science fiction comic book fandom is already there. What was most striking to me, nobody said that until the very end. It took probably 20, 30 minutes of Q&A and discussion for anybody to bring it around to that point. That to me is remarkable. People who are fans of these characters, people who are fans of comic books, of science fiction, of fantasy, they're ready to hear a message of liberty. They're ready to hear a message of individualism because they've got characters right in front of them all the time who are saying all of those same things, just not in the words that we would use. And I really think all it takes is a little nudge. Maybe a lot of little nudges. But we can use this pre-existing cultural momentum to our advantage if we get in there. I guarantee you, if we don't, the folks who want to push the progressive agenda are going to use their momentum to take us in the opposite direction. And given the extent to which geek culture has become popular culture, given the extent to which these kinds of stories have become the everyday fodder for everybody, I don't think we can really afford to let that happen. Thank you, guys. Any questions?